Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spar&Brawl, and I hope you're having a great day. My name is Kam, and I'm one half of your hosting duo. I'm joined by my friend Sam, sparring partner, training partner, debate partner. Sam, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Hello, everyone. Hope you're bringing good news for you today.
Yeah, so Spar&Brawl, as some of you might know, is a weekly news podcast that we have started where we look at stories from all over the world. We don't focus on any specific regions or countries, and at times we might get a bit heated. Brawl has yet to break out, but we promise you it might at some point if a story gets a bit spicy. But so today, what we have, we're going to look at the Republican convention. Sam has a great overall story about oil prices going all the way back to pre-coronavirus and until now, and how that has impacted and how it's being received in the Middle East and different countries. After that, I will talk about an experiment conducted and a new study that's been published, which shows the impact that an order received has on the human brain, and why that perhaps people are able to perform atrocious acts simply because they have been ordered to do so. And then we're going to talk about a new report put out by UNICEF that is very concerning regarding the number of children who weren't able to study remotely during the pandemic. And then we're going to finish off, as always, with a semi feel good slash disturbing story involving an American priest. Right, Sam?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Sam, please start with the first story for today, which is about oil prices and the Middle East.
Sure. Well, there is an ongoing what some describe as a war going on between different oil-producing country. On one hand, you have Saudi Arabia, and on the other hand, you have Russia. They are both competing for marketplace, basically, especially because Iran, for example, was pretty much pushed out of the oil market. Venezuela is having a hard time selling its oil sometimes. So they are competing for oil markets and future of oil market, and they are trying to destroy their biggest threat, which is shale oil, which has made America one of the largest producers of oil because it allows them to extract oil from places where previously you couldn't extract oil from. Not environmentally the most friendly way, but it's a game changer in terms of oil production. But when the oil prices are down, the oil extraction through shell is not economically justifiable. So Russia and Saudi are basically trying to destroy shale oil while at the same time growing their own markets and limiting the growth of the other side, right? So you have and this led to oil prices falling to even below zero, like negative, because of the cost of storage. And it's very hard to store all these barrels of oil and all that. To fall to negative, I believe even before Corona was such a global pandemic, right? Then you had Corona, which led to a huge cut in demand of oil from China, from a lot of places. Further, reducing. It didn't cause further reduction because at that point, the oil producing countries had sort of come together to, and not allow a further reduction in price. But it did. But the Corona caused the oil prices to stay down, basically, at that point. And what was going on there was that Saudis were basically flooding the market. There was this meeting between OPEC countries and Russia, and Russia refused to cut its oil production. It's just generally never been in Russia's interest to cut its oil production, because when it can basically grow its markets, right? And because extracting oil is not very costly for Russia. It's costly, but it's not very, very costly. So they refused to cut their production. Saudis flooded the market with cheap oil in just the unbelievable amounts. Basically, they flooded the markets. Oil prices plummeted. Then there was the coronavirus. Oil prices stayed down. Shell took a huge hit in the US. There was even talks of potentially introducing tariff on Saudi oil in the US, which was an unprecedented move because of the long-standing US-Saudi relations. And just about a week ago, I believe, Russia and Saudi announced a sort of a deal that would see a major cuts in production to push the price of oil higher and higher. However, from the reports I read, a lot of experts are not very they are not very positive about this deal. They don't see how Russia can actually cope with this deal, because Russia has a very hard time cutting its production. The thing is, if a lot of infrastructure and oil extraction equipment in Russia is very old and is located in some of the coldest places on earth in Siberia, if they cut production, then some of the equipment freezes, some of the equipment cannot be restarted. That's one issue. Another issue is the fact that they don't have a lot of storage facilities in Russia. So that's the second issue. So a lot of people are not even sure if they can, cope with that. But this deal is a good sign of probably a more partnership between Russia and OPEC countries, but it's definitely not a guarantee. And while shale oil extraction in America seemed to have taken a hit from this whole price war, it doesn't seem to have stopped fully. In fact, the US government seems to be determined to help it to continue to grow. So I don't think the policy as a whole was successful, and it basically ended up damaging Saudis, their allies in the region, and Russia more than it did damage US companies.
Okay, I see, I see. Interesting. So can you just highlight the deal once again? What is exactly the deal?
What is exactly in the deal?
Yeah.
With markets collapsing, Putin, this is from a website called World Oil. With markets collapsing, Putin agreed to cut more than 2.5 million barrels a day of crude oil from the 11 million of combined crude and condensate Russian pumps each day, more than 4 times the reduction that he turned down in early March, and more than what Saudi Arabia is obliged to cut from its output level last month. Meanwhile, hopes that the US would formally commit to its own curbs have evaporated, even as Trump takes credit for bringing about the New Deal. This deal was first announced by Trump through his favorite mode of communication, Twitter. And yeah, basically he managed to get the credit for the deal in the beginning, at least.
When was this announced?
I think 3 days ago or 4 days ago. He tweeted about this, if I'm not mistaken. And he tweeted that there is a imminent deal between Russia and Saudi or OPEC. Basically, the oil war seemed to have benefited US the most, Then Saudi to an extent, because Saudi allies took a big hit. Saudi, Bahrain, because Saudi has the bigger, obviously the biggest amount of foreign currency compared to Bahrain, compared to Kuwait, compared to Oman, compared to UAE, other oil producing countries. They seem to have taken a bigger hit compared to Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia suffered too, because Saudi Arabia, it's quite costly to extract oil as well. But Russia seemed to have lost this one basically in terms of overall geopolitics of it all. Although Russia grew its market a bit as well during this time, probably.
Yeah, so both Saudi and Russia have agreed to limit their oil production, right? That's the agreement.
Yeah, but Russia more so than Saudi, and Saudi already, I think they already had internal agreements with OPEC countries to reduce their, uh, production, or at least reduce their output. Because the whole war, the whole price reduction in oil by Russia and Saudi was aimed at destruction of the shale industry in America. That was the main target, and that didn't happen. It's the, I believe, it's the third time, if I'm not mistaken, that at least Saudis have utilized this strategy. They suddenly reduce oil prices to a significant, extent, unbelievable extent, to destroy up and coming competition. I believe they did it in, and if I'm not mistaken, they did it with like alternative energy, like in 90s and 80s. They did it with, I think they did it with Iran and Libya at some point as well. It's a strategy they used, and it never works. Basically, it's just because like now, U.S. government has started basically supporting the shale industry a bit more, and although it may have weakened its growth, it may have limited its growth, but it didn't destroy it. They diversified that everything. For example, let me read this report.
Yeah, but I'm guessing just the prices being down is of course limiting the shale gas industry in the States, right? Because just like you mentioned, in Saudi Arabia they have crude oil, which is much, much cheaper to produce, whereas in the States they did,
To extract.
yeah, to extract, sorry. And in the States they did used to have crude oil, I believe, but I think most of their reserves have been used up over the past few centuries, and now that recently they no.
No, I don't think it has been. No, no, it's just U.S. doesn't survey or extract, or it's just investment in U.S. oil has been much less than they don't have large producing companies. A lot of it is privately owned, like privately owned wells. So they have a lot of reserves. I think U.S. may have the largest oil reserves
Wait,
or something, but it's just not being extracted,
but in these reserves that you're talking about, are you including shell oil in it as well, or are you just talking about in terms of crude oil?
Uh, Crude oil, as like I think they have very, very large reserves of crude oil as well as shale. I think so.
I
It's
see.
just not. It's just there has never been an investment to extract it.
I see. Well, okay, and then the shale oil is expensive, is more expensive to extract and produce, as you mentioned, because they have to basically, everybody's heard of this word probably, fracking now. So they have to use hydraulic fracking technique to get it out, which is not only bad for the environment, as it also emits emissions and CO2 as they're trying to extract the oil, which isn't the
But
case when it comes to crude oil. And in addition to that, is more expensive Therefore, when the price of oil is low, it's probably around 50 or 60 and dollars per barrel. At that point, it's not actually economically profitable, right?
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, I think there may be a misunderstanding here, but crude oil is the end product, right? So you can, I mean, US has massive reserves of crude oil. It can reach it through fracking, or it can reach it through. Like, I don't think shale oil is a different type of oil, from what I understand.
But the
You see what
extraction
I'm?
process is totally different, right? It's extraction process is completely different. What do you call the oil that the Saudis have, like when you extract that kind of oil?
Yeah. Oh no, actually it is. I just Googled it. No, you're right. Shale oil is a different kind of oil as well. But no, yeah, the extraction method is different, and the extraction method is much more costly.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think oil prices, if they might should be somewhere above $50-$60 for shale oil to be even to even break even, not even profitable. I think.
Yeah.
I think.
I know that
But
in the Canadian context, and they have a lot of similar oil. I think it's a bit different in the tar sands oil that they have in the Alberta region on the west coast. And there, I believe oil has to be over $100 a barrel for it to be profitable.
wow,
Yeah,
yeah, well,
which was
I
which
mean,
was that was the price I think about 10 years ago.
yeah, yeah. During Ahmadinejad's presidency, the oil went as high as $150 a barrel. That was great. I'm just looking at it. I'll hopefully we'll include this picture in our video, or put the link below. But there's a picture of the map of countries with proven oil reserves, and US is somewhere in the middle high. Towards, it's not towards the highest, but it's as I thought previously. But it's, you know, and although I do think it's like surprising to me that it seems Saudi and Venezuela seem to be the one with the highest proven oil reserves.
Yeah, I think Canada falls in top five too. No?
Yeah, Canada is one of the. It's color. It's like they have been categorized based on color, so I can't say exactly which one is the top five. But yeah, I think Canada and Iran seem to be. It's Saudi and Venezuela. Venezuela seem to be the highest one. Then Canada, Iran, Iraq. Then you get Russia, and then China, America, that type of thing.
Okay, so and do you know if how has this impacted the market since this agreement was announced?
Well, initially when Trump tweeted the news, oil prices hit the highest price they have in the last 6 months. Basically, they went on a surge. I think it went down again, it went up again as they confirmed the news. It hasn't really, this deal doesn't really come into effect until next month or so. Although the oil trade is really, what do you say? It's about the futures market a lot, When the oil was negative, it was negative, like it was because of the futures market and all that.
Yeah. Can you
So,
explain that just for a quick second? So is it the case that you buy oil based on future prices or something along those lines?
well, I mean, I don't know enough to explain it, to be honest, but you buy the oil because it's in a barrel and it's stored. I better not explain this part, I think. But yeah, oil prices are, I believe, in mid 40 $45, something like that. But yeah, it's good, and it's been, I think it's on a steady rise at the moment. At the moment.
Yeah, and then we also mentioned, I think, in last week's story, in last week's podcast, or the one before that, at how Saudi Arabia broke all kinds of records selling oil to China, and that China didn't buy any oil from Iran. They're being marginalized more and more, I believe, in the oil market.
Well, things have shifted somewhat. Iran seemed to have fast-tracked the oil field in West Karun, which is a river. So they're fast-tracking that oil field, which is supposed to be moving to phase two of production, where it delivers its goods to Port Josk port in Iran, which is one of the ports that has become sort of famous or infamous through the Iran-China deal, because it's supposed to be providing oil largely to China, or solely to China even. So they seem to be, moving very fast to produce oil for the Chinese market. At least there seems to be plans of purchase by Chinese in very near future, it seems. So, alliances are shifting all the time, and God knows what's going to happen in the future, and God knows what's going to happen with the price, because Iran seems to have promised a 16% discount on oil to China. So I don't know how that's going to affect the markets.
But this is crazy, and it makes me think that the only way we're gonna, at any point, if you think about from a climate change point of view, to phase out oil will have to be through prices. But then again, countries where they have access to cheap oil, they're probably willing to go as low as $20, $30 a barrel, or even less. They'll still be able to produce and sell oil. So how oil is going to be phased out and replaced by renewable energy, it really seems to be a long, 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 long way.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's the idea that I've always been very skeptical of those views that, through changing habits or whatever, oil is gonna be phased out. Or first of all, right now, oil is being phased out. It's being replaced by gas, because it's like, I think when a barrel of oil is $45, gas is like $2 or something. It's like, so it's a much more efficient way of doing things. So that's first of all. Second of all, these things happen with massive investment in infrastructure. Like when oil became the major source of energy, it was largely due to the decision by the British to shift the navy from coal to oil. That was a decision that was taken, and if that decision was not taken, the infrastructure was still based on coal, because UK was a coal producing country. So what I'm saying is basically it's a political decision. It's not. I don't think it's going to be a decision that is. It's not a reality that is going to happen because of the changing habits of people, and because they drive electronic cars, or they put some, sun energy thing, solar energy on their rooftops or whatever. So, yeah, I don't think any of these developments reflect the hopeful future in terms of environmental alternative energy being used more.
No, exactly. Unless for some reason big players, big countries decide to, make a switch, somehow suddenly renewable energy becomes as profitable, which, I don't see how we would get there anytime soon.
Exactly. Although I would say, in a strange way, maybe I mean, what you see is that Saudi Arabia definitely they tried to not lose their markets. They did a heavy investment in their oil industry, but at the same time, they did try to diversify their economy, just as a way to cushion themselves against the, fluctuations in the market. You do see that. So same with U.S. U.S. Companies like that type of thing. But at the same time, you get countries like Russia, which are aggressively expanding their oil production, and now the what do you call them, the North Pole is basically opening up for oil extraction and all that. So who knows how where it's gonna.
Like 15 years ago, even before that, there was some hope that, well, we're going to run out of oil at some point, so that's going to solve our issue. But actually, we're definitely not going to run out of oil for a long, long, long time to go. I mean, even if some of these more profitable and easier way to access oil are all used up. I mean, there's the shale gases in the States. Other countries, I'm sure, have that tar sands in Canada, and of course, offshore drilling.
Exactly, and I mean, I always was so disappointed when I found out the truth that, for example, half of the world is not even surveyed for oil and gas. So there are potentially, like there is talks that Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, all these places filled with mountains, there is potentially oil and gas underneath all these places. So uh, it's just the beginning in terms of, uh, unless we make a political decision, we are not going to use these things because of law or because of that. It's never ending. We're going to always find a new way to extract them. And yeah, it's but in terms of just I was saying that shale oil may have been somewhat impacted. For example, take a look at this news that Norway's Equinor, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. I think it's related to aquatic or something like that. Equinor is a one of the largest shale shale extraction companies. Will not drill any more wells in the U.S. shale patch this year as it adjusts to a lower for longer oil price environment, a spokesperson for the company said, as quoted by Hart Energy. The company stopped drilling in the Bacan and Marcellus shale plays where it has previously drilled in March this year, as it has slashed billions in spending in response to the oil price collapse. So there was an impact, but it wasn't as big of an impact as the Saudis and Russian hoped for. And by the way, for example, in terms of like other competitors, Iran was already out of the game because of U.S. sanctions. Iran was already crushed by that. So Iran had already developed a strategy to deal with with pretty much no oil income. So it didn't really affect them.
Exactly, and things such as war have taken care of places like Libya and Iraq, which I'm sure are producing and exporting much less oil than they would be capable of doing.
Iraq is an interesting case. Even though Iraq has been affected by war and civil war and all that, its oil fields have largely remained stable because they are controlled by Iranian and American forces in a very. It's just when two evils come together, it's just everything works, you know. And if you notice, all the oil fields are in the south, in the Shia majority area. So when the ISIS was ravaging through Iraq, the oil fields were the least damaged by that.
There you go. So not even war can damage oil production. So maybe in Libya only a little bit.
It has to be a major war. It has to. I mean, it's if we go back to even First and Second World War, if we look at why Germans tried to find alliances in the Middle East, it was largely to get their hands on the British oil, which they failed miserably both times, you know. And yeah, oil always seems to just continue.
All right. Anything else add to this story?
No, sorry if it was a bit of a rambling story, but it just has a lot of different aspects. But I'll definitely try to do a bit, I'll try to read up and do a bit on futures markets because it's so hard to explain. But I'll definitely try.
No, and talking about oil is almost fun.
So now that we are done with our first story, can you tell us about what's the second story? What did you bring for us this week?
Yeah, so the second story, I thought we'd focus on a group of oil-loving people known as the Republicans in the States. And everybody knows there was the Republican National Convention this week, and what kind of caught my attention a little bit, and it made the news, was in regards to viewership. You know how much the media obsesses with how many people watched it, and I don't know. I find it to be a bit relevant here. So I was just kind of thinking if whether the number of views that the each night got in the Republican National Convention compared to the DNC, whether that indicates in any way voting behavior, and I mean, and who will get elected at the end. But of course, we all know that in the States, it's a system that, you know, it's not overall. They're counting how many votes you got. It's state by state, and you win that state. So even if you got a lot of votes, maybe they're just limited to one state. So in a way, it doesn't even really make a difference. You got to get those delegates. But I think it still shows a little bit about the enthusiasm level of Americans out there. So let's just look at a few numbers that I got for us down here. So these are the numbers for this year's RNC and DNC convention. So on the first night, the GOP got 17 million views, and this is all on TV, and then we'll move on to internet. 17 million views on TV, which is 25% less than the amount of views the first night got in 2016. The DNC actually got 2.7 million more viewership, more views on during their first night, but that's also 25% down from last year. So we can see both of them pretty much lost a quarter of their viewership since 4 years ago, although the Democrats seem to have done much better the first night than the Republicans. Then some of the figures for the third night. On the third night again, the Democrats got 5 million more views than the Republicans did on TV. Now, one of the main arguments that have come out from many political commentators is that now a lot more people watch things online and not on TV. And according to this one article, there was a 15% drop in the number of people who have cable TV at home in the States since 4 years ago. So subscription rates have dropped by 15%, which is quite a bit. But then I also found some numbers for online viewership. So on the RNC's official YouTube channel, I think this is the first night, they only got 342,000 views, whereas the Democrats actually got 750,000. But then, for instance, on C-SPAN, the Republicans got 500,000, whereas the Democrats only got 77,000. Now, I'm not sure. I'm sure there were a lot of other like channels themselves, like the major big channels. They streamed it online, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were some niche places where a lot of maybe young Republicans watched it or other Republicans watched it. But then again, the same thing could exist for Democrats. But if someone told me there were more views online for Republicans in some niche outlets, you know, ones more towards the far right, I think that would make sense. But it seems that the Democrats got a lot more views than the Republicans have so far. And this, I was just, you know, what do you think this indicates, Sam? Do you think this indicates anything? Do you think there's any value in looking at how many views they received?
To be just to add to what you said, Personally, I watched some of RNC and DNC online, but I watched it in as a part of a live watch along with some journalists that I like because just it's not bearable just to watch the convention. It's just I rather kill myself, to be honest, or do many number of other violent things to myself. But
But for instance, do you know?
I no, I just I don't think it's really I think it's an interesting factor, but I don't think it really can tell us about voting behavior. But I am surprised though, because I thought if there is any attraction to watching any of these conventions, it would be Trump and his team of fascinating, it's just, I find the whole team fascinating. So yeah, I'm surprised that RNC has lower viewings because really Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, like, I don't know, I just find them boring.
Okay, just 1 second on that. But then, do you remember how many people watched the video that you're talking about? Like, how many people are watching it?
I can check right now. Let me.
Because, okay, I'm guessing that
For
that video that you're talking about got somewhere between 40 to 60,000 views. That's my guess.
Yeah, oh, it's gone now. I mean, it was a live stream when I watched it, so I'm not sure if I can find the data, but I'll take a look. But when I see live streams on this channel, oh, 10,000.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if even if you add up all of these out there, if they even reach a million or so. So I think the
Sure.
Democrat,
Yeah, I agree. I just think it means the data is not very clear.
yeah, but I think the Democrats probably, which I found surprising. But I think that one thing is that Trump coming out there and talking crap is not that novel anymore. So a lot of people probably watched it in 2016 just because it was fun to watch Trump. Whereas the Democrats had Joe Biden, but they also had Obama. And Obama, for some
Uh,
reason, is just still so exciting. I mean, they might as well forget about Biden and just have Obama. At least we'll learn about how to be
I
a
thought
good
that's
public
what they are
speaker.
doing.
Yeah. At least, that guy's one hell, his speeches and stuff are so much better than Biden. I'd rather at least watch him. Maybe I'll learn a few things about how to be in front of the camera. But so they had that attraction going on. But so anything funny that you saw, anything interesting from the RNC? I think everybody saw the video of that lady going crazy. I don't know her name. She was
Oh
a
yeah.
previous Fox host where she's like screaming.
Ladies and gentlemen, leaders and fighters for freedom and liberty and the American dream, the best is yet to come.
But hey, she did her job. People were mocking her, but her photo went viral. They're good at these things, the Republicans. I mean, they don't mind making a fool of themselves in front of most of the world because they know that a lot of people eat it up, and even those people who don't eat it up, at least they'll see because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Kimberly Guilfoyle. Guilfoyle. She's interestingly, I didn't know this, but apparently she was a girlfriend of Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. Quite a not very, but somewhat left-wing governor of California, former mayor of San Francisco. She was his girlfriend, and guess whose girlfriend she's now?
Trump,
It's a bit of a huh?
Trump Jr., one of Trump's sons.
Yeah, Donald Jr.
Yeah,
And
Donald
I
Jr.
think, did you see Donald Jr.'s speech? I mean, I think this was speculated on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken, as well. I think they were both on drugs, man. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure they were both on drugs. Like, Jesus Christ, she was I mean, come on. I don't understand how she maintained that level of energy throughout. It was crazy.
Yo, kudos to her. I mean, you're a crappy person who goes out there and just, says hateful stuff, but the performance, you can't hate on it. The energy level out there. If I was her coach, I would have been, you get 10 out of 10.
Okay, I don't know though. Like, it depends. I guess the audience she's playing to are maybe at that level. They need something like that. But I mean, it just so it felt very theatrical, just over the top.
Yeah, but when they share short clips from it and when they share photos and stuff, it looks a bit less ridiculous. It's really ridiculous when you watch it until the end and she's just screaming and then it's like nobody in front of her.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, conventions used to be about actually electing, because U.S. system of election was based on caucuses and people actually showing up and all that. Anyway, so they used to be very very noisy, very busy things. They did it, and maybe in that sense, it in a place filled with people making noises and shouting and all that. Maybe it would have made sense in that environment, but just empty room with just cameras, people, socially distancing. It was a bit weird. But I just generally speaking, though, I don't think people are like they're too worried about watching these things live as well. Most people are waiting for them to finish and then they view the highlights on their phone, like short videos and stuff. So I don't know how much viewership can tell us about popularity of the parties, especially because it seems that old people's vote is going to be the deciding factor, and I don't know how much they watch TV or they watch or anything.
They watch mainly TV and just one other number. Now, this one I think is the most interesting indicator, and that is that Fox, when it came to Republican National Convention, they just killed everyone and they broke their previous records as well. And you know that those people watching on Fox, they're loyal Trump supporters. They're not just watching for the fun of it. So, I mean, his base is just another indication, I think, that his base is going to be relatively strong.
So Fox News had a higher viewership than other channels?
Oh, on the Republican National Convention, I think it outdid all of the other major ones combined, if I'm not mistaken, or very close. They got 7.5 million views, I think, on the first night. The other channels, but I mean, it makes sense. They're the only right-wing channel really in U.S. cable and U.S. TV, because then there's MSNBC, CNN, which is, I don't know, who knows what CNN is, and the other ones are kind of Democrats.
Yeah, who knows what CNN is? That's the slogan, I think. But yeah, but what was it? There is America First or some right-wing channel, some other right-wing channels. But you're right; they are the only major one. It's yeah, yeah. One of the funnier thing was how they said Melania Trump's speech was so good and brought everybody, unifying his speech and all that. It was just so bland and boring, and I don't know, all of their speeches. What's his name?
Mike Pence got made fun of a lot. I mean, even in mainstream media, they're like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Just an alternative universe.
I don't think, to be honest, his speech was that fantastical, but it was very boring and usual. Everything is good and, we'll be better than the other guys. Trust us. It's just, terrible speeches all around, I felt. I don't know. I didn't like any.
But honestly, if the Democrats don't win this time, given that, the coronavirus has not only ruined the American economy, but it's stripped Trump as one of his favorite and best campaigning tools, which is going around and giving speeches and campaigning. So he can't do that. They're going to limit the number of debates. A pandemic has hit the United States. All of the mainstream Democrats are supporting Joe Biden. So, I mean, even if in this scenario they can't win, they should really take a harder look at themselves. But that's not something that they would do. I'm sure most Democrats, mainstream Democrats, if they had to rank between having Bernie, Biden, and Trump, it would be Biden, Trump, then Bernie. So even if they lose, they don't care. They're going to try the same because why would they want the Democratic Party to go towards the left, as it would become just a totally different party?
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, this is an argument. A lot of people who say you should vote for Biden no matter what, like even though he's not very lefty or he's very like he hasn't offered the left anything, you should still vote for him. They argue that people like Tom Perez and the Democratic Party officials and corporate Democrat, whatever you want to call them, they don't want to win. They rather be in opposition, because when you're in opposition, you can talk shit, get money, fundraise, and not do much, like not be responsible for much, except like showing, I mean, at least Nancy Pelosi is a good example of that, just showing the most, opposition in gesture only, not in substance.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that they mind that. I mean, if it's their own guy in power like Biden, they're like, sure. But yeah, they probably wouldn't mind that either. But I mean, they would want either Biden or Trump to win.
Yeah. Like they argued that Trump was the best thing that happened to them in terms of, just providing them with a boogeyman to fundraise against.
Yeah. And I mean, their whole election, all their messaging is literally around that Trump is a bad person.
Which nobody knew.
Yeah.
Just
I was reading this article, and it said that, can't let Trump become president. It's going to be devastating for the climate. And then it's like, Colin, no joke, it's going to be terrible. So the headline was really good. So I decided to read this article, although I didn't think there was much to it. But then again, they're just saying, hey, Trump is going to take us to blah, blah, blah with the climate, which isn't going to be good. But then I was thinking, okay, he might do one or two more things that will make it worse. But what is Biden going to do? I mean, has Biden even talked about some kind of green plan or anything like that? So no, it's barely going to make a difference, maybe even in that way. So he has his whole task force that apparently has Bernie on it and other progressives. But I have yet to see even some kind of proposal. Did I miss something?
I think they have made proposals of gradual shift towards a green energy. They haven't endorsed the Green New Deal that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, proposed, I believe, and Bernie signed on to or stuff. And in fact, there is a primary election right now, a Democratic primary going on, where Ed Markey, who was one of the earliest people to sign on to the Green New Deal, he's running for re-election, right? And then you have Joe Kennedy, who's running against him, and Nancy Pelosi. It's just mind-boggling. Somebody who always was, you shouldn't, if you're a congressman or a senator, you shouldn't endorse a challenger to an incumbent. Yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's very bad decorum. That's very bad thing to do. She endorsed Joe Kennedy, right, against Ed Markey, who's not even a left-wing, congressman or something. He's just one of the first people who signed on to the Green New Deal. So I don't see I don't see I mean, they have talked about certain policies that is definitely more environmentally friendly than Trump's policies, and I'm sure they're not going to put a form like I think the head of EPA under Trump is literally somebody who was like a head of a chemical factory or something. Like it's so like bad. I don't think they're gonna do that, but at the same time they're not offering much uh, in terms of like moving towards a more green future. So yeah, it's not looking good. Yeah.
No, I mean it's just such a. I mean, it would require such mass mobilization to actually make some significant change that just these little things on the margin will probably make absolutely no difference really down the line.
Yeah, and to be honest, if I want to be completely honest, I think no party, even parties on the left, are have the courage to be really serious about this environmental issues, because I think at this point, because of the damage we've done to the planet and all that, first of all, we have to accept that serious issues gonna arise in near future. Like there are certain things that are irreversible at this point. I think we have to accept that. For example, the ice melting in the North Pole and all that. That seemed to be going on at such a fast rate, and a lot of things gonna happen for sure. So we have to accept the new reality. That's one part. And I don't know, did you ever watch the new Michael Moore produced documentary about global warming?
No, I heard about it a lot though.
Uh, I can't recall the name. I'm just googling it to mention the name of the movie. But that movie, very very barely, they just touched on the issue of overpopulation, and perhaps maybe we need to control the level of population growth. And everybody attacked them for being, oh, you're talking about eugenics, oh, you don't want poor people to have the right to have kids, oh, you blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's my view. Obviously, they think that that documentary was was a way to contraband eugenical ideas. But I think that's the major issue. It's the population. It's not so much oil prices. It's not so much people. Oh, we can all use. I don't want to an extent. I don't want to live in a world that we all use recycled pea to cook or something. So I think the major issue is population, and no party, even people like really lefty people like Jeremy Corbyn in UK, they don't have the courage to face up to that, I think. So, I think we're going to live in a very dark future because of it, sadly.
But Sam, you know where I stand on this, and I don't think that population is whatsoever the issue, because it depends on what population that you're talking about. So yes, if populations keep on increasing and everybody adopts the lifestyle of, let's say, someone living in the US, that is true. But that does not need to be the case, at least in the future. Now we just talked about how hard it is to have change for, to change people's behavior and everything. But I think if we're talking about 30, 40, 50 years down the line, it is possible. And so much of CO2 emissions, so much of waste, so much of things that are being produced and consumed are consumed by a small percentage of the world's population. So let's say if we got rid of half of the world's population right now, if we don't get rid of the right half, nothing will change. Like emissions wouldn't even go down even one bit. And actually I read this study recently that was interesting. And in this study, they find that the projections for population growth are incorrect, and they're not going to be the case. And in fact, human population will, I'll link this study, it was also covered by New York Times. population will reach our maximum population around 2065, and they base this on increase in education and contraception. And in fact, from then we're going to start seeing population going down and declining. So I don't think we should be too worried about the human population just increasing and increasing over time.
It's first of all, it's not that if we get, I'm not saying that it's just because of the number of people. There's just people are consuming too much energy. I think all our structural problems are rooted in overpopulation. For example, there is a famous argument made that the Black Death and the plague caused the number of people in Europe to go down, and therefore the number of peasants became much lower, and therefore the peasants could they had more unity and they could charge more for their labor, right? There is a crowding effect, in my view, that causes a lot of structural issues that lead to our way of consumption. And to be honest, I don't think we all want to live like maybe the typical American lifestyle that comes to our mind in California with Hummers driving around. But we don't want to all live in farming ourselves as well. A lot of us want to live somewhere in the middle. That's one issue. Second issue is, based on most prediction, human population gonna balance out in 2100s or whatever, as China, as developing world, the education levels go up and all that. But I think until then, we're gonna have a lot of problems because of overpopulation, because of the excessive young population in the developing world, in my view, compared to the excessive old population in the developed world. So I think maybe to say, I never said we need to depopulate necessarily. It's just we need a population policy. We need a control over our population as a whole. I think at the moment it's just basically, it's one of the most important things in the world, and I think we are just it's a right, it's a human right, we should never meddle with that, and I think that's wrong. But I definitely see the arguments against my point of view as well, I must say.
And I don't have anything against planning and having policies for the future. I think it's very important. And obviously, whether you have 2 million inhabitants or 20 million, of course there will be a difference. And I think then you can argue what will be the positive and the negative differences. But one thing I wanted to push back against, for instance, take Lebanon, right? A country of just 4 million people, right? If you don't include Syrian refugees, let's say. So based on your theory that you're kind of saying, your point of view, a country with such a small population shouldn't have an issue. Whereas there are countries with much bigger population who are better off. And then another example, for instance, if you take I've told you about this example before. If you take the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, they have, I think it's somewhere between 60-70 million inhabitants of people. And a country right next to them, the Central African Republic, only has, I believe, around 5 to 7 million people. And they both, arguably, the Central African Republic is in a worse shape than DRC. So I think population is one factor, but you can see that how little it can impact how well and what shape a country's in, that other factors can completely overrule it.
Yes and no. First of all, Lebanon, I think for the amount of land and access to water they have, they are probably overpopulated. But I'm not sure about the DRC example because I don't know enough about that specific country and region. But I think, I never look at it as a country on a country basis. I look at it as the global sort of situation basis. For example, I mean, I just don't think you would have as much outsourcing of factories if there wasn't as much cheap labor available in India. You can say that, yeah, protectionist policies would have helped with that too, sure, but I do think when you have massive amounts of population who you can't, it's hard to feed, then certain options become more attractive. Yeah, there are multitude of factors, but yeah, I think for the environment, at least for environmental issues, I think that's the crucial factor, and nobody in the DNC or in the RNC is willing to, or in any major party is willing to, face that issue. Even just the Chinese Communist Party has abandoned its one-child policy. So, it's not just Western. Yeah, they did it a couple of years ago.
Yeah. No, well, according to the study that I mentioned, China's population is gonna, I think, go all the way down to around 800,000 by the end of the century.
I think the thing is, these politicians seem to be worried about Iran. Iranian leader has been promoting increased childbirth. They are worried about, the productive base. A lot of people are going to get old, go out, they're not going to work, they're just going to be getting pensions, they're going to live longer than what originally thought. So, that's an issue. But the thing is, we have to move towards the robotization of the workforce, mechanization of the workforce. I think that's the way to go forward, in my view. And basically paying people basic incomes, again, in my view, or maybe giving them basic credits or something. And that's the future, I think. And nobody wants to admit that. So, yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of solutions to go around that. You could pay people more per hour for their work and all that to compensate for how much less they're going to have to work. But I mean, I definitely disagree that population is a main factor in the problems that we have with the environment and climate change and in the future. And I think it just really I think other factors such as policies and what you do have a much bigger impact than population does.
Yeah, well, I definitely think we should do one. We should do just a brawl one time just about this topic. But yeah, but yeah, it's just, again, RNC and DNC, both of them, I felt disappointed by their environmental coverage, and I think you probably felt the same way.
No, 100%. I mean, it's not even a thing right now. I mean, in the States, it doesn't seem to be an issue that they can unfortunately talk about right now. And some of it is understandable given the pandemic and given other kinds of horrific violence that is going on in the States and terrible issues. And of course, everybody all around the world has their day-to-day issues. I mean, it's just hard to focus. But all these years that are given, in 10 years this, in 20 years we have to do that, with the Paris Agreement and all that. I mean, I feel like there's zero movement towards meeting any of these deadlines whatsoever. And earlier on you were saying that I think there's been some irreversible changes. And of course, I think when it comes to, the amount of time that humans can think of, so 100, 200, 300 years, there's definitely been irreversible changes. Now, what the planet's going to look like in a million years, I don't think it will have probably a lot to do with how we impacted it. Maybe it will, but probably not.
Yeah, no, I meant in our at least our species lifetime, perhaps. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I think we kind of talked about the RNC and DNC, and then let's just see what happens. Just one last thing, have you been hearing anything about the polls and all that?
The updates I had was it seems to still Trump is behind Biden at a historical level, 8 points, which has never been the case for an incumbent president. But this is he has caught up some ground in terms of he was behind 20 points, 15 points. Now he came back to 4 points behind, 5 points behind. Now he's back. He seems to have stabilized around 8%, but there hasn't been like the latest. I'm waiting for the latest round of polls after the RNC, see if that had any impact. Probably not, but maybe.
All right, everyone. Now we're going to do our About Last Week segment where we give updates on any of the past stories that we covered last week, if there have been any developments. So we have one for today, and that's on the Iran arms embargo. As you are aware, the U.S. wasn't able to extend the Iranian arms embargo that is set to expire under the Iran nuclear deal, and this made the U.S. to resort to a mechanism that was under the deal called snapback, and if now they have initiated it, and we're going to see what's going to happen. So one thing that could possibly happen is that nobody can really counter that, and in fact all of the sanctions will be reimposed on Iran, including sanctions related to the development of nuclear and nuclear energy, so not only on traditional weapon. So there's it's unclear what is going to happen. Everyone as part of the Security Council is pretty much saying that the U.S. cannot use the snapback mechanism because they're not part of the Iran deal anymore. Trump took them out of the deal. But I think Pompeo and the U.S. are saying, no, it's fine if we're not part of the deal. We're a member of the Security Council and we want to do this. So to me, it seems like it's been over a week now. And I think we've hit a standstill. There doesn't seem to be much progress and doesn't seem like what's going to happen. Sam, do you have any news or updates on this?
Yeah, well, not so much. I guess it is an update in a way. But to clarify, U.S. I read an article. They put it in a very, I think they put it correctly, that the problem is the writing of the deal. U.S. has definitely left the deal, right? So they don't have a legal standing to trigger the mechanism known as a snapback. But according to the deal, the Security Council is responsible for enforcing the deal. So U.S. position is that legally we are still enforcers of the deal and therefore part of the deal and therefore can trigger the snapback. Well, the major update we had was that the UN Security Council President, which is currently with Indonesia, I'm not sure if it's a he at the moment or a she. I'm not sure who is the person. Received a letter from the other, I believe, 13 members, basically except Dominican Republic and America. Everybody sent him a letter saying that you should not acknowledge US's action as triggering of the snapback. And Indonesian president of the Security Council at the moment agreed with that and rejected US's triggering because after a country that is part of the deal triggers the snapback, the next session, the president of the council should introduce a draft, and the Indonesian president at the moment refused to do that draft. So at the moment, it seems US's triggering has failed, although it seems US can introduce its own draft to the council, which definitely will be rejected. But then US is saying that we won't be bullied, which is kind of an odd thing to say for the US. But yeah, it's still, I mean, US seems to be on the losing side in this one, but the mechanism for even for settling this dispute is not really clear. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. I think you gave as good as an update you can get on this story. It's really unclear what is going to happen. But I think they're meeting very soon in person in Vienna, members of the Security Council. I read that.
Oh,
So we'll see if there'll be any further developments.
yeah. I mean, because if a snapback is triggered, it is supposed to cause the return of all sanctions on Iran, all Security Council passed sanctions in Iran within 30 days. So it's while it is very unclear, it's fast developing. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, so I think that's it for about last week. I tried to look and see if there were any updates on the Russian vaccine stories that I were given. Nothing except apparently the mayor of Moscow is encouraging his citizens to take part in the trial, in the vaccine trial. So nothing there really. And I think it still just backs my point about the whole outrage initially about the Russian vaccine. They took it too much at face value when they reported and commented on it. So that's that.
In a way, they played into President Putin's hand in terms of publicity, at least, because he probably used that as an example of, look, whatever I do, I announce a goddamn medicine and they go crazy. Like, oh, hello, the weather is good. Oh, no, you know what? I mean, he's a dictator, whatever. But yeah, it's just not anything anyone says should be, reacted to this.
Exactly. So, I mean, the concerns are legitimate. This vaccine hasn't been tested in a phase 3 trial, but at the same time, they're not vaccinating the population. So it makes absolutely no difference. And if in fact their trial is going to involve 40,000 people, that's 10,000 more people than most of the vaccines being tested in the States. So if the trial actually goes through, they're going to lose that argument as well. Now,
exactly.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to my third story. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, so yeah?
Yeah. No, I believe it's a study, right?
Yeah. So this next story is on a new scientific study that was just published about a week ago. And this study looked at why is it that people can more easily inflict pain on others and commit things such as war atrocities simply because they have been ordered to do so. Now there is the very, 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 very famous, I believe it was from Yale University from the 1960s, called the Milgram experiment. And this study showed that people are willing to inflict a lot of pain on others because they've been ordered to do so.
Actually, 50% of the subjects obey the experimenter's commands fully in the experiment depicted in this film.
165 volts. Time. That guy's hollering in there.
Continue, please. Go on.
Well, there's a lot of them here, They love a heart condition there. You want me to go?
Just continue, please.
However, that study didn't look at the mechanisms that are triggered in the brain. So why is it that people are willing to follow orders and commit horrendous acts? So this is where this study comes in. And pretty much orders, this study argues, and they found, and pretty much I'll tell you about how the experiment is carried out, but it's based on monitoring of the brain using MRI, so seeing how different parts of the brain are impacted when you receive an order, as well as feedback and responses from the participant. So the human brain, based on the study, and for a different channel that I have and that I run, I actually interviewed the researcher who conducted this experiment. So she was saying that the part of the brain that deals with empathy, that's what allows us to understand, okay, if I inflict pain on this person, they understand that that's how they know that inflicting pain on somebody else will hurt, because of the part of the brain that deals with empathy. And what they pretty much found out is that when you receive an order to do something, it affects that part of the brain. So this is what the experiment was like. About 40 people were invited, 40 participants. And all the participants, one of them were a group of victims, so they received a shock in their hand, a very small shock. And the other group of people, they were administrating the shock, and they could see through webcam whenever the person received the shock, and there'll be a little twitch in their hand. So at first they were asked to, it was just free. They sat the people there and they were like, hey, whenever you want, just administer this shock on the victim. But then after that, they told them, okay, now it was coerced. So they told them when to administer the shock. So the researcher, the leading researcher behind the study would tell the participant, okay, shock the person now, okay, shock the person now. And they found 3 things came out of this. And these were both observed through MRI scans, so viewing parts of the brain, how they're impacted when they receive an order, as opposed to when they do it freely, as well as responses from participants. So they pretty much found that when you're ordered to do something, you feel you're less responsible for that action. So this was observed once again through MRI scans as well as feedback. But what was more interesting is that you feel less guilty about it. And what was even more concerning is that you believe that it's causing less pain than when you had done it freely. So the participants were well aware that whether they administered this pain, this shock, whether they were coerced or whether they did it freely, it was the exact same amount of shock. It didn't increase or decrease. But when they were asked how much pain you think you inflicted on the person, whenever they were coerced, they believed that they inflicted less pain than whenever they did it freely, although they were fully aware that it's the same amount of pain. So those are really the 3 findings that came out, that when you're ordered to do something, the part of your brain that has to do with empathy is impacted, and this leads to you, A, feeling less responsible for the action, which is, I guess, a given. You feel less guilty, which is also not too surprising, but you also feel that you're inflicting less pain, although you're fully aware that it's the same amount of pain that is being inflicted. So this study really looked at the mechanisms behind why people are able to carry out such horrendous acts when they're ordered to do. And another small finding is that all the participants were they either first administered the shock, so freely and coerced, but then they were also the victim, and they switched around. And they found that the order of whether if you were the victim or whether you were the one shocking the person, it didn't make too much of a difference. The only difference was that people who were victims first, they tended to pretty much administer the same amount of shock as what they had received. But the researchers believe that given the size of their population and the fact that it didn't show any other differences when they were victim first in the MRI scans or in their responses, it is unclear if people become far more vicious when they were victim first or not. So I found this study to be really interesting and just shed some light about why people can commit horrendous acts and inflict pain on others when they're ordered to do so.
Very interesting. Can you? That wasn't clear to me. How did they determine that they thought they are inflicting less pain now? Did they ask them, or did they?
So they asked them. So both, it was through the scanning of the brain, and I guess the parts of the brain that was activated. This part of the study is a bit harder to understand, but one part that we can understand for sure, that they straight up asked the respondents, the participants, and the participants themselves, although they were fully aware it's the same amount of pain and shock that was being inflicted, they thought that it was less painful. So yeah, they asked the participants.
All right. So self-reported.
Yeah, self-reported in this case, exactly.
Interesting. Which country you said this?
This study was carried out?
Yeah.
The researchers from Brussels, so I'm guessing the participants were just Europeans, and they all received 5 cents for every shock that they and that they administered. And then I asked her a little bit off camera. I was like, well, can someone say that it really doesn't have much to do with people feeling less guilty or the amount of pain? People are simply ordered to do so, so they just think that they have to do so. But she's like, well, in our study, I ordered them to do that, but I didn't put a gun to their head, so they could have left if they wanted to, but they were fine with carrying out the experiment. So I guess it really shows the mechanisms and why people are willing to inflict pain on others. Whereas in real life, of course, they will really be coerced. So then it will really push them to, maybe have much less trouble carrying out such acts.
No, I definitely see that point of view. Although I would say, I mean, the famous study you mentioned, one of the major criticisms, which I can see the point to as well, was that, when people are when you put somebody in a lab coat and in an experimental situation, you are willing to do a lot of stranger things than, like, you might not do that in your workplace, even if your boss says so. But because this is an experiment, you think, oh, there must be a scientific reason for this or something. So yeah, that's the only major, the thing that could underline the result, perhaps.
But this study, I mean, there's a picture of how it was carried out, and it is much. The participants weren't lied to in any way. It was a much more relaxed and less. I mean, I've seen videos from that experiment. I mean, that kind of experiment, you can't replicate it anymore. It was unethical in so many ways for scientific study.
Oh, yeah, I would, yeah, the old one.
Yeah, the old one, exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. No, but very interesting. I mean, I'm pretty much of the view, though, that generally speaking, people will do anything for money. So, I'm not surprised. So.
That's true. And then, when you think about it, people working in companies and corporations, they're willing to do things that they themselves maybe oppose in their personal life. But at work, hey, it's work.
Yeah, exactly. It's sad, but it's true.
Definitely. Okay, and then have another small story for today. I found this story again, so I can move on to the UNICEF story.
I'm ready.
Okay, so the next story that we have for today is about the pandemic and education. So at the height of the pandemic, not the height of the pandemic, at the height of the lockdowns worldwide, about 1.5 billion children weren't able to go to school, and they were supposed to learn remotely. But a new report by UNICEF has found that a third of children, so almost 500 million, had absolutely zero remote learning going on. And they estimate this pretty much based on the tools that are available to households around the world. And about a third of children simply do not have access to computers, internet, and other tools that are required for remote learning. So at the bare minimum, a third of children completely missed out on months of school, and they will probably miss out on months of school next year. So this was based on the fact that they don't even have the tools. And globally, 3 out of 4 students who cannot be reached by remote learning come from, of course, rural and poor households. So in this UNICEF report, they have broken it down by region, and in a lot of places in Africa, around 50% of the children didn't have any remote learning going on. And then the report suggests that one of the best ways, I guess one of the most accessible ways of carry out remote learning is through TV. And that's only because, a lot of households, more households at least, have access to TV than internet and computer. Although I find that to be I don't know how you're going to carry out remote learning on TV. So that seems a bit strange for me. But I mean, most people would have probably imagined that there was no remote learning going on for most children. So if you take into consideration other factors, can probably say half of the children worldwide, probably. I'm just estimating here. The report says 30% based on what tools they have access to did not have any remote learning going on. And I think one of the most severe impacts that the coronavirus pandemic is going to have on the world in the years and even decades to come, I would say, is in fact the number of kids who are going to miss out 1 to 2 years of education. And I forgot to throw something in. The kids, okay, so if you look at pre-primary, that's where most number of kids weren't able to, of course, have access to remote learning. It's harder. And then primary kids as well. So as you went higher up, there was more access to remote learning. But that's even more concerning. I can just imagine that the education that you receive in your primary level, the basics are some of the most important that everybody at least needs. So this many kids missing out on potentially almost 2 years of school in a way, give or take, I think is going to have terrible ramifications. And I think that's one of the main things that politicians and policymakers worldwide need to focus on. Yes, getting the economy back together and opening up shops and businesses is very important, but figuring out on how to get as many kids, I think, back to school, not even just improving remote learning, but somehow getting kids back to school for half a day, for a few hours per day, whatever it is, should be one of the most important and highest prioritized objectives of governments right now around the world.
Well, again, I think we disagree a bit here, but first of all, I generally don't think school, especially in early years, is that important, to be honest, as a educational thing. It's more important in terms of social, I guess that's education too, like in terms of socializing with others, with seeing other types of people in growing. I don't think math or literature or all the bullshit they taught us in the early years, just generally, I genuinely don't think that matters. But I do think the social aspect is very, very, very important, that children are missing out on that. That's one thing. And second thing, I have a very, very young nephew, preschooler, is about to start a school this year, actually. He's 5, so this year he will be starting a school. And it is, in terms of child's mental health, I think, just, and the parents' mental health of just being stuck with a child 24/7 inside the house, that could, has significant effects, I think, because it's just, they are full of energy, and just, you can, it's just, you run out of energy at some point and they're still running around. So it's tough. But in terms of just in terms of academic education, I'm not too worried. Although I think if you're teenager, that's really rough. If you're a teenager, or if you just started university and they tell you your freshman year you have to, it's all online courses and no part, to me, that the social aspect of education seem to have been more damaged by this whole corona thing, because you can study at home, I think. And it's funny, you said TV education. I never experienced this, but my older friends that they lived through Iran and Iraq war, that was the case in Iran and Iraq war. There was a set time on television that they had the best teachers come and teach math, and then they had a set time to teach them literature, and then they had a set time to teach them physics. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know. But there has been experiments done before. So it's sad that education is being hit. I do think if we rethink our education, maybe if we increase our schools but decrease the number of people in them, reduce class sizes, school sizes, all of that, that could be a good solution long term for, if for future pandemics perhaps. But for this one, I guess I can't think of really a short-term solution, unless governments act very fast and set up temporarily schools. I don't know what they can do.
So I agree with everything you said, except the first thing where you disagreed with me. How can you say that primary school is not the most important? That's when in the first few years, that's when you learn how to read and write, which is like just the basic of being literate, and you learn the basic stuff in math. I would argue that the things that you learn later on become less and less important. That's why primary school is compulsory in most places around the world. I would think that that would be much worse. Because I was also thinking the same thing about university. I was like, hey, in third or fourth year of university, you don't go to class, it makes no difference. But going to class A for the social issues the first few years is important, but also you need as much help as you need because it's a totally new world to get going. But anyway, going back to school, I think the primary years, and I think the problem is that after, everybody's still going to be rushed, right? It's not like, okay, these kids missed out on this, let's make sure. No, you know how it is. It's always like, okay, next year, you have to graduate by this time, and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know, kids missing out on those. You don't think those years are more important? Like when you learn how to read and write and basic math?
All right, I may have made a mistake, or there was misunderstanding. I agree. Yes, you're right. Reading and the very basic math. I think, all right, the first 2 years of primary education is super important, but after you understand reading and writing and the very basics of math, and by very basic I mean, what you say, adding, subtracting, divisions, and multiplying. That's it. That's all I mean. It. After that, until pretty much like late high school, that's all pretty much, in my view, bullshit. It's just genuinely like I think from age like 9 or 10 to, or even 8, no, 9. All right, let's say from 9 to 15, most of the education, or 16. It's just, useless. It's mostly just a place to hang out, I feel.
So I think we agree in many ways. You're just like, you're getting confused with the years and stuff. So first of all, you're like 9 or 10. That's already fourth or fifth year. So I think if you start school at...
No, 9 is third grade.
No,
right?
6, 7, 8. A lot of kids, when they're 9, they're in fourth grade, and 10 is fifth grade. If you start at the age of 6 and...
All right, 6 first, then second. All right, okay. I mean from third grade onwards, basically.
But I mean, I think they start teaching you how to read and write in first year. That's true. But I'm guessing for kids to have like a proper grasp, it probably goes all the way until third or fourth year. And let's say in your third or fourth year, your practice diminishes like significantly. You're probably somewhere back to square one in a lot of kids.
From what I remember, third grade, when they started teaching us those hateful concepts, biology, chemistry, and physics.
What? In third grade? What kind of school did you go to? That's not true. They start teaching. There's no such thing as sciences in primary school.
Yes, there are. I'll check. I may be so traumatized by my later education that I feel it is. But no, but maybe it's. I think. No, man. I went to proper Iranian school. You didn't go to proper. I'm sure we had sciences, like natural sciences or something like that we didn't have we had arts. Yeah, we had arts, which was drawing basically.
I remember biology from 6th grade. I remember sciences from 6th grade.
I think there was sciences, and then they branched out to different, but even anyway, but yeah, you're right. Reading and writing is very important, I think, to be honest. I did, but no, I just don't. I meant I'm very much anti, later education in Middle Ages. It's very bold. It's filled with a lot of fillers. I think they didn't know what to teach them, so they just put it.
Yeah, a lot of it is, and I think they should they should add other things that will be more general for people how to learn, such as critical thinking. Or for instance, in history, I mean, they just talk about the history of their own country, like their own propaganda, like every year about the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, you can all the history you learn in school, I think you can like, summarize it in 1 hour, even for kids. I remember hearing the same stuff over and over again. It's probably different from one school to another. But then this
Yep.
also reminded me of, are you familiar at all with the stories going on in the States where, sorry, not in the States, in the UK, where kids going to private school apparently ended up getting far better grades this year, or at least predicted grades, than kids who went to public school in the UK?
Oh yeah, yeah, but that's a different. The problem there was that they basically they did a his. There is always these criticisms that people feel that the education standard is going down, but the grades are going up. So they have recent years they have tried to not allow the grades to go as high. So what they did, because there couldn't be exams for because of coronavirus, they in UK at least there is this thing called predicted grade, where your tutor, based on your work, predicts your grade. And they had a predicted grade, and then they based on an algorithm, which led to really cool protests by high schoolers saying fuck the algorithm outside the education ministry. And they, based on algorithm, they downgraded a lot of people. And because people in in status schools, as they're called in UK, public schools are called status schools in the UK, and private schools are actually called public schools because something. Anyway, they all got downgraded more so than the rich people in other schools because of it was based on a general trend. But that was very complicated, and just education as a whole has been hit very hard by Corona, I think. And one thing I would add, you said about critical thinking and history. I think, to be honest, at a very young age, they should really focus on. I don't understand why they don't teach us. That's my biggest disappointment of education. I think they should teach, to be honest, farming, cooking, sewing, like useful shit, we had a bit of like, we learned how to repair a bit of like electronic devices or something, but like teach people how to build a fucking mobile phone or fix their mobile phone, or software coding, not just, I don't mean just physical stuff, like teach people useful shit when they have the time. Now we are all old and we don't have the time, and we all need these skills. So that's my view, because at a very young age I don't think you can teach too much critical. Like, even if you try to teach history, like you try to teach, I don't know, feminism in 1960s to 14-year-olds old, and I don't think it's going to go down well. I think it's going to become, they're going to get bored, or they're going to make fun of you. So just teach them basic stuff, I think. And sports, like in terms of, not sports, in terms of physical health. I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely, I think kids get bored anyway in school. So, I mean, maybe you can just start teaching them some kind of critical thinking and some things like that a little bit as they get older. That's true. And when you're saying about teaching, skills at a younger age, I agree with that. I just don't agree with people who take it like so far and they forget in what kind of world we are in now, right? They're like, oh, people don't know how to build houses anymore. I mean, even if I knew how to build a house,
Yes.
I don't know too much about what I would do. I mean, I'm sure it would be useful, but it's
Okay,
also like,
you know what?
but I
You
do
know what?
agree. No, I just,
I'm
sorry.
advocating for, if when you have a child, you move to a forested area near some freshwater lake or something for 2 years, and until the child has learned to hunt and cook for himself. That's my position.
Yeah, no, it's just, I completely agree with what you're saying. I just feel like some people blow that out of proportion, that kids are not taught to do this and that. I'm like, some of it has value, but in the current world, some of it doesn't have that much value. You know what I mean? I mean, it would be good to learn a little bit of gardening, you know, at the basic level, but you know, learning about actually how to farm like properly is not going to be useful for most people.
No, to be honest, I do think that part actually, I agree with you as a whole, like, but I do think farming and animal farming, even these two, if we can teach these two to most people, then we might, this might be a dream and very optimistic, but we might see a change in terms of political economy, because if we can make people in terms of, if we can make people energy independent and food independent, that could change the whole, you know, way our society is organized. That's just my hope.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but I guess then again we're limited by you know structural the current system. You know, I live in an apartment. If I knew more about farming, I'm sure there are ways I could have tried to incorporate on my lifestyle. But besides growing maybe tomatoes and some baby spinach, like that's as far as I could go. But I completely understand your point. I just think some people blow it out of proportion and they talk about it as if we're in a different world. For instance, 30, 40 years ago, people would be like, oh, you know, you should teach, everybody should know how to do the basics of mechanics and fixing cars and all that. Now, if you go and buy a new car, you don't need to know how to do anything except changing a tire.
Good. Yeah, I mean, like, you need to know computer program. Like, all your knowledge from the era before is all useless. You're right. No, I just think uh, if you can, energy and food are just such basic necessities that if we can, you know, get those independently, like, it's basically a minimum guaranteed for living, for, like, you know, and maybe that you know uh, maybe it would just change the way society is organized, basically. But I definitely agree, though, it won't happen by people just start doing it. It needs to be a different thinking about the education system as a whole for it to, like, in 10 years or 20 years has actual, you know, result. It's probably not going to happen. What I'm saying is that I have a dream. That's all.
And there's plenty of room to teach all of these things. Because, I mean, the math that you learn after sixth or seventh grade, you're never going to use it unless you become a mathematician or a physician or, you know, in these kind of fields. I mean, engineer, you know, the things, which is good if you're in that field, is totally relevant and useful. But I mean, the amount of time that is dedicated, especially to things like, I mean, the amount of time that's dedicated to math is serious. I think, and yeah, and now I'm just thinking countries and governments probably have no problem doing it. You know, it's not a political issue. There's a lot of people who know about math, who can teach about math.
And it's, to be honest, in many way, in terms, at least just visibly, it's much more useful. You know, engineers, they build bridges. What do poets do exactly?
They entertain people.
Express feelings. Oh, thank you. How exactly that contributes to our GDP growth? Yeah.
Through
So,
entertainment. You put your poems on YouTube, you monetize it, and there you go.
to be honest, that's actually, I mean, I mean, that's not something I'd be saying a lot in serious arguments, but, you know, there was a time where UK made more money from its music industries than a lot of its other industries. So I do think, for, like, a country, my home country, like Iran, is actually, when you have low population, like, there's not much land for agriculture, there is not much raw material for certain industries. Intellectual property is not a bad way to go. Like, you could focus on that, but, you know, again, that's just another dream. So.
Yeah. Okay. So to wrap up this story, pretty much the UNICEF report found that a third of kids didn't do any school learning, and their methodology and evidence is that they don't have the tools. So how could there have been any remote learning? But okay, Let's move on to our next story, Sam. What do you have for us for our last story, for a feel-good story of the day?
It's not so much of a feel-good story, but it's definitely a funny one. And it kind of connects to our education story in a way. Because as I'm sure many of the people who watched our show probably know, there was this very famous evangelist priest, or I don't know what they are, vicar, I don't know. But he was Jerry Falwell. Jerry Falwell was massive in 80s, and I think he had good relations with Reagan and all that, and basically a religious extremist in many ways, you know. Uh, and just to remind people how much of a religious extremist he was, he blamed 9/11 on paganism and feminists and abortionists, you know, and lesbians, all you know, the usual, blaming natural disasters on people who are LGBT community and all that type of thing. So very nice guy. He passed away a couple of years ago. His son, Jerry Falwell Jr., took his place as the head of the, I guess, family business. One of the parts of the family business was Liberty University, which is a highly religious university where I believe they don't allow even the male students to wear shorts. There are strict laws against dating and, curfew hours for ladies, and I'm guessing for boys too, to like at 9 you have to be back in your dorm room. I don't think they're allowed to have mixed sex dorm rooms, that type of thing. Very forward thinking place, basically. And when I originally told you the story was not where it is now. It was originally just the controversy over the fact that he had a picture taken with a pregnant lady where he had his zipper open. And people said, well, at your university, you are so strict about laws, and then you do this and you're taking a picture and blah, blah, blah. And, he was criticized, and then they put him, sort of forced him to resign from Liberty University, which he did and stuff. But then this story has evolved immensely since then to a crazy story where a former business partner of theirs, a business partner of Jerry Falwell Jr. and his wife, has basically, has alleged that before he was their business partner, he was their pool boy, and he has alleged that he had affairs with Jerry Falwell's wife while Jerry Falwell watched. So the story has turned into a cuckold story, and then there are all these other allegations coming out. One from a former friend of their son, a former bandmate of their son from high school, university, who alleged that the wife of Jerry Falwell attacked him at night and gave him oral sex by force, pretty much. It's just your typical story that it turns out the religious nut job actually has more sexual kinks than, like the kinks that he's trying to suppress in others. It turns out he has all of them and some more, basically. But it was, look, I generally, this is not about kink shaming or anything. This is just about the pointing out the hypocrisy, because, people are different. They have all these different things. But let me read this news part. A former Liberty University student says Becki Falwell, the wife of university's then president Jerry Falwell, jumped into bed with him and performed oral sex on him while he stayed over at the Falwell home after a band practice with her eldest son in 2008. So I imagine Quote, this is a quote from him, she was the aggressor. I love how he's describing their relationship as aggression. So the messages, screenshots of which were provided by the former students to Politico, suggest a flirtatious relationship that went beyond what might be expected of a mother communicating with her son's bandmate.
Geez, so this person was underage.
No, I don't think they were underage. They were at university, so I would imagine they were all above 16 or 18. I don't know what's the law in that state. So there are states in the U.S. where the the consent age is like 12 or something. It's really fucked up.
No, that is true. And there was that ad that came out last year that highlighted but child marriage in so many states, or in some particular states in the US, is like 12 or something.
I mean, I don't think I might be controversial in that I think it should be somewhere around 16 where it is in UK. Some people find that controversial, think 18. But there are places in Germany when it's like 14. It's very varied, and surprisingly so, I think. Anyway, but until this point, this is like a very controversial story pointing out the hypocrisy of a religious leader and all of that. Fun, good. It's all in good fun, I think, at this point. Then it took a crazier turn. Like, this is after I was done with writing my notes on this story. A crazier turn was taken. There were rumors that because Jerry Falwell played a big role in bringing the Christian vote towards Trump, because everybody thought he's gonna, in the primary of Republicans in 2016, they thought he's gonna go for Ted Cruz, who was the classic evangelical politician. But then what happened was that he went for Trump, actually. And then there were rumors that he had met with Cohen, talks of certain pictures and all that. Now, let me read you this. This is from CNN, I think. Now, Michael Cohen, President Trump's former personal attorney, if people remember, I don't know if people remember him. He was portrayed by Ben Stiller in SNL. Michael Cohen, President Trump's former personal attorney and fixer, tells CNN that he intervened to make sure revealing photos of the Falwells were not released publicly in 2015. These were personal photos between a husband and wife, Cohen told CNN. I'm guessing because they were personal and only between a husband and wife. That's why Cohen is now describing them to any news channel that is willing to pay for it. So, everybody just comes out of this story just great. Initially, Cohen told CNN he confronted Granda's attorney. I don't know who is Granda, to be honest. Granda is the pool boy. Is the business partner / pool boy. Sorry. Granda, that's his family name. Granda's attorney about the photos, but later on Wednesday, Cohen corrected himself, which is, well, not great. Cohen is famous for lying, so I guess he might be lying about this whole thing. But it's one of those great stories that it starts with one really clickbaity, yellow, like low value news bit, and it just snowballs into a political crisis. It's really good. I enjoyed it.
Yes. So the last details of this story broke this week, pretty much.
Yeah. That's. I mean, I haven't checked this morning, but I'm sure there has been an update. Okay. So before the news broke that it was a very strange, not a usual relationship, that the pool boy was having an affair with the wife and Jerry Falwell was watching. Before that part broke, apparently Jerry Falwell knew the story is gonna break the next day. So the night before, he throws his wife under the bus, saying that the wife was having an affair with the pool boy, and I gave her for it. So the story is just so good in terms of just backstabbing and push, like, oh no, no, me, I was the bigger guy. I forgave her for having an affair. But it's just, yeah, it's a great story. And there hasn't been any. I'll definitely try to update everybody on this story because it's just fucking great. And yeah.
You know when you said he threw her under the bus, I thought he literally pushed her in front of a bus for a second. I was like, makes sense.
Yeah, and this just to shift the attention of media to a different controversy.
Well, okay, this was the least surprising story of all time. And what I liked about it, though, the good thing is, nobody seems to have been hurt. It wasn't a pedophile story that has to do with a religious person. Him and his wife and a pool boy. Lovely, wholesome story, kind of.
In a way, yeah. It's just the fact that they're in their public life, they are such religious extremists that yeah. But I would say that it's great, yeah, because even like the pool boy and their son's bandmate, what's like, they got few high fives out of this. I think they weren't emotionally damaged or anything. But I just hope this is a story that continues for years to come. Like drip by drip, we find out more details. Just because it's funny.
But one thing, and what's happening with the university? Is it being closed down or anything like that? Is there anything?
Oh, no, he had to resign. The board forced him to resign as the president. No, the university is going as strong as always. It's just his position was undermined. And yeah, he's out. I mean, to be fair, he's typical, father was very charismatic, evangelical. I mean, his father was a monster, but he was, I would assume, I don't remember, I mean, he didn't live in the age of internet as well, but he wasn't as clumsy in his PR, at least. He only said horrible shit that you expect. He didn't, his horrible shit that you don't expect didn't come out.
Jeez, that was one hell of a story. So many levels to it so far.
Oh yeah, it's just so many betrayals. The third party betraying the major two parties, then the husband betraying the wife, and then the Christian right betraying their leader. It's just great. It's a great story all around.
This story would have probably gotten more attention in 2016, because in 2016, the topic of evangelicals and evangelical vote and everything was a much bigger story than now.
Yeah, probably. I would say it's a story that would have. I think most the stories you can say would get more attention before 2016. I think after 2016, Trump really just level of like you need to go an extra level compared to before 2016 to be even qualified as a controversy. Like, it's not enough to cheat on your wife anymore. It has to be in a weird, like, I was in Brazil with 6 different people and my family members were also involved. It has to be something really fucked up to stand out.
Yeah, I mean, during the I think probably when he launched his election and during the primaries, that's when he said some of the most horrendous things someone could say.
Man, it's so funny. You have these, I watch a few old movies, I like political movies, and you have these old movies about based on true stories of politicians who had to leave politics because they had an affair. And Trump, literally, there's a tape of him saying you can grab them by the whatever when you're. It's just great. He just changed the game. Now you have to be a genuine monster to people to pay attention.
I wonder what.
Go ahead.
I wonder what Ben Shapiro thought when Trump was saying those things, because you've heard of Ben Shapiro reading the lyrics to a new Nicki Minaj song. song.
Oh, yeah, I heard a bit
The
about
way
that.
he's acting, it's as if you think like,
What?
these lyrics were handed out at school as like, this is how kids learn how to read or something. It was
I, I watched half of the video, then I got so bored I left it. What was his point? What was his problem? Like, yeah, it's bad, like it's rude. Okay, what's the problem? Like it's bad for our moral culture or something? That's his point?
I guess so. I mean, it's a hard video to watch because it is very boring because he's reading the lyrics as if he made some kind of discovery. He's like the first person to read the lyrics, or I don't know, find bad words in lyrics. I don't know what his thing was.
Yeah, it's just he's this. I don't know. I'm not a. My problem with Ben Shapiro is the fact that I mean I don't know. Maybe he's a smart, but at the best he's a grifter. He's a huckster. He's not. He's not. He's the information He's not talking intelligently about any issue. Maybe he's smart in a way he's presenting himself, but I hate that some people at least consider him to be intelligent or his arguments to be intelligent. It's just not. He's just talking very fast.
Yeah.
That's pretty much seems to be it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's apparently about just talking fast is the thing. And I find that from TYT and Anna Kasparian, I love when she
Oh, yeah.
imitates him. I find that she does it like really, really well.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, Annika Kasparian. By the way, shout out to her name, especially. I recently found out Anna is short for Anahita, which is a very common Persian name. I didn't know that. Yeah, her. To be honest, my favorite work by her is when she attacks Dave Rubin. Although she has done it much less so, but it's just Dave Rubin is just such a. It's just such a perfect target, I suppose, and she does it from. She's very good at analyzing and destroying his presentation because I mean he doesn't have any substance, so we are just talking about the style. And yeah, but I agree, after Dave Rubin takedowns, Ben Shapiro takedowns by Anna Kasparian is just fucking great. And these two, I mean, Ben Shapiro is a bit boring, just Dave Rubin is just so funny because he's just so stupid. He clearly doesn't give a shit. He's just trying to, just say some words to make some people happy.
No, exactly. When people read an extract from his new book, I mean, it was just there was nothing in it. It's just empty.
It's like a 14-year-old with who has heard of certain like liberalism and left and right. He has heard it on TV when he was like playing games or something, but he doesn't know what they are. So it's really funny. It's really good.
No, that's funny. All right, I think that's it. Any last comments, last thoughts, anything controversial? Do you think the Earth is flat or anything like that you want to throw out there?
I mean, that's obvious. I don't see any debates there. Yeah. Obviously, the Earth is flat. But besides that obvious fact, and the fact that we were all created from mud about 6,000 years ago, no, thanks. I feel like this was a bit of a rambling episode. Sorry, the news couldn't be so much to the point. But, hopefully we'll have further discussions in future weeks. And I cannot emphasize how much I hope the Jerry Falwell story continues to feed us for future episodes. Since Epstein, this is the most fun I've had. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean, this is a podcast, and if there are stories that we can really give the details, if we find them for that week, it will be like that. If not, it's just going to be more of a chat and conversation about what's going on in the news in the world, whether it was this week or recently or whatnot.
Right.
And yeah, okay, so that's about it. We should actually ask everybody after every segment to please subscribe if they like the comment, and of course give it a like. We keep on forgetting to say this after every segment, but we'll leave it for the end. But yeah, if you like the content, please make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment if you like in the comment section. But
And
that's yeah.
you know, we don't want to come across as too needy, so maybe that's good.
No, I've heard people they beg.
Right. It works. Begging works. Okay. All right.
From what I see, it's okay.
To be fair, sometimes you watch a good video and then they say like and subscribe, and then you remember, oh shit, if I want to continue. So yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally a likabilist. I like anything as long as it's not something bad. So
Wow, that's good.
hey, it's the least you can do, and apparently it does help a lot. That's how YouTube really decides what content to show to people.
Yeah, no, I was bad at it, but I'm trying to be more active in like supporting the channels, the videos I like.
What an ungrateful guy. What an ungrateful guy. Anyway, so that's it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.